Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Abraham Cooper, and I'm honored to serve as chair of the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF. Thank you for joining us to mark the 25th anniversary of the International Religious Freedom Act, or IRFA. I would like to extend, on behalf of the commissioners, a special thank you to Senator Chris Coons and his staff for reserving this historic room for us. In October 1998, Congress passed, and then President Bill Clinton signed IRFA, making the promotion of freedom of religion or belief abroad a higher priority in U.S. foreign policy. IRFA established USCIRF, and the State Department's Ambassador-at-Large, currently Ambassador Rashad Hussain, as well as the Office of International Religious Freedom. The law required monitoring and annual reporting on conditions and delineated consequences for the worst violators. It is also incorporated religious freedom concerns into U.S. diplomacy, programs, training, as well as refugee and asylum policies. 25 years later, religious freedom issues are more integrated than ever before into U.S. foreign relations. We've seen the benefits of IRFA. Violations have been documented and exposed, and violators often sanctioned. Repressive governments have changed laws and policies, and they have released some prisoners. Issues of international religious freedom, or IRF, now receive significant media and public attention, including today, for which we are grateful. Importantly, the United States no longer stands alone in recognizing the significance of freedom of religion or belief, or FORB, and don't worry, we won't have a quiz on all of these abbreviations, or FORB for everyone, everywhere. Various countries and the European Union have created FORB ambassador or special envoy positions. These and other countries have established an international contact group and alliance and have held regular IRF ministerial conferences. Networks of parliamentarians and of non-government organizations focused on FORB have also developed. USCIRF is proud to have been involved in the founding of both the International Parliamentary Network and the Washington, D.C.-based NGO Roundtable, and continue to actively engage with both. USCIRF remains a unique entity in this space. No other country has a similar commission. USCIRF is an independent, bipartisan advisory body that monitors conditions abroad based on international standards, evaluates U.S. policy, and makes independent policy recommendations to the President, Secretary of State, and Congress. USCIRF has 9 commissioners. There are 3 appointed by the President of the United States, 3 are appointed by the leadership of the Senate from each political party, and 3 are appointed by the leadership of the House from each political party. USCIRF has an amazing, nonpartisan, young, dynamic professional staff of about 20. Commissioners are private citizen volunteers. We come from different political parties, different faith and professional backgrounds, and different parts of our beloved United States. Yet we all agree on the importance of freedom of religion or belief for everyone, everywhere. We also agree on the need to shine a light on the severe abuses so many individuals of all faiths and of none who suffer simply for exercising their fundamental God-given right to religious freedom. We were among the first to call for recognizing China's horrific persecution of Uyghurs as a genocide. We continue to call out Russia for its anti-Semitic rhetoric and Holocaust distortion in an effort to justify Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine. And last week, we condemned the brutal terrorist onslaught by Hamas, whose anti-Semitic charter justifies violence and worse against innocent Israelis. And we iterated that invoking any religion to justify taking innocent lives has no place in any society. Today, we are going to discuss URFA's importance, the accomplishment of its first quarter century, and steps to take in the years to come. Our first speakers are two of the key congressional sponsors of what became URFA, Commissioner and former Representative Frank Wolf, otherwise known as our Commission's moral GPS, and former U.S. Senator Don Nichols. Former Senator Joseph Lieberman had planned to join us, but had a last-minute change of schedule, so we have pre-recorded remarks from this great American as well. After that, we'll have a panel discussion highlighting the importance of advocating for specific victims of religious freedom violations. And to conclude, commissioners and staff will share their thoughts on URFA and USCIRF's impact and their suggestions for the future. Before we start, I would like to thank the former USCIRF commissioners I see in our audience here today. I also want to thank Congress for its commitment to advancing international religious freedom and continued support of USCIRF. We expect members of Congress to stop by to offer their comments throughout the event, as well as their support, we hope, in addition to written and video remarks provided to us. Though I made mention of it before I give the floor to my esteemed colleague and friend, Fred Davey, I would be remiss not to mention again the butchery of the Iran-backed Hamas terrorists and the special challenge those criminal acts pose to people of faith everywhere. Let me now give the floor to USCIRF Vice Chair Fred Davey, who will outline some key URFA and USCIRF accomplishments and then introduce the first panel.
Thank you, Vice Chair Cooper, and thank all of you for joining us today. I am Fred Davey, and I do serve as Vice Chair of, did I call you Vice Chair? Thank you, Chair Cooper. And I am Fred Davey. I do serve as Vice Chair of this commission. Let me just say, in response to Chair Cooper's remarks about the horrible situation in Israel, Gaza, first, I am proud to be able to stand with him and with Imam Majid in the statement that we issued on behalf of USCIRF condemning the horrific attacks of Hamas, also calling for an end to religious incitement and incitement of religious-based violence, and then my own sort of commitment and deep concern that I know we all share for the humanitarian situation in the region, particularly in Gaza. So I stand with the rabbi, I stand with Imam Majid in this acknowledgement of the horror of that situation, and hoping that for a just and peaceful end to it soon. Let me also say that it would be really important, we believe, if there were a national prayer service. USCIRF would, I think I can speak for my commissioners, we talked about it today, would be more than interested in helping to organize and participate in a national prayer service that called for an acknowledgement of the brutality and the horror and the depravity that has taken place in the region, calling for compassion for human life and innocent lives in the region, and calling for a just and peaceful resolution to the horrors that now exist there. So, Rabbi Cooper, I want you to know I stand with you. Imam Majid, I'm really pleased that we can all join together as commissioners of USCIRF and issue the statement that we've issued. Let me now turn to the agenda of the day, and preparing for this event has given us an opportunity to reflect on IRFA's and USCIRF's impact both over time and in recent years. And we shared some highlights in a USCIRF fact sheet that is available in the room and hopefully that you all have. Since we celebrated IRFA's 20th anniversary in 2018, we have seen robust use of newly available tools in the Frank R. Wolf International Religious Freedom Act and the Global Magnitsky Act, including designations of special watch lists and entities of particular concern, and the imposition of targeted sanctions against religious freedom abusers. In addition, both President Joe Biden and President Donald Trump nominated their ambassadors at large for IRF, or for International Religious Freedom, in record time. 6 months into each new administration, the ambassadors were nominated. Then President Trump also appointed, for the first time, a director of international religious freedom on the National Security Council staff and issued an important executive order on the issue, which the Biden administration continues to implement. The first 5 years also saw the founding of the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance, or IRFBA, and as our chair said, no one will hold you to a test for these acronyms that we will spout today. And then the launch of regular International Religious Freedom, or IRF, ministerials. We've also been gratified to see foreign governments make improvements on religious freedom issues in response to U.S. concerns. To give two recent examples, both Sudan, during its period of civilian-led transitional rule, and Uzbekistan engaged closely with USCIRF and the State Department in their efforts to amend restrictive laws and make other positive changes. This led to progress sufficient for USCIRF to conclude that country of particular concern, or CPC, recommendations were no longer warranted for either country in 2020. But with civilian government no longer in power in Sudan and recent backsliding in Uzbekistan, USCIRF continues to closely monitor both countries. As we reflect today on the past 25 years' many accomplishments, we cannot be complacent. State and non-state actors around the globe continue to perpetrate or tolerate severe religious persecution. In too many countries, individuals and communities are still targeted for their religious beliefs, activity, or identity, or for their religious freedom advocacy. Those individuals and communities are why IRFA, or International Freedom Release Act, was enacted. And they are why the global efforts to promote freedom of religion or belief for all remain essential today and for the future. To start our discussion today, we are so pleased to hear from three of the key sponsors of the legislative effort to promote international religious freedom, who will share their personal reflections on IRFA's creation and trajectory. First, we will see video remarks from Senator Joseph Lieberman, who sends his regrets, as we've heard, that he is unable to join us today. He served in the Senate from 1989 to 2013, representing the state of Connecticut. He is now senior counsel to the law firm Kazowitz Benson Torres in New York. Our next speaker will be our own colleague, friend, and as Chair Cooper said, moral GPS, Commissioner and former Congressman Frank Wolf, who served in the U.S. House of Representatives from 1981 to 2015, representing the 10th District of Virginia. Commissioner Wolf was appointed to USCIRF by then House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy in 2020. And finally, we will hear from Senator Don Nichols, who represented Oklahoma in the Senate from 1981 to 2005. He is currently chairman and CEO of the Nichols Group in Washington, D.C. We will now play former Senator Lieberman's pre-recorded remarks on the screens. So we're going to have a slight change in schedule. I am told that Representative Gus Bilirakis, how'd I do, is here with us, and we'd love to hear from you, Congressman.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks very much. I guess this is on. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I'm glad to be here again commemorating the 25th anniversary of the International Religious Freedom Act. I am a representative from the state of Florida, and I served with the great Frank Wolf for many years, as did my father, Congressman Mike Bilirakis. So we've been working on these issues, and he's been the leader, along with Chris Smith, in the House. It's a testament to the incredible work, again, by three true statesmen. We need them now, that's for sure. I wish they were in the House and the Senate, but we thank them for all their work. I want to thank them directly. My former colleague, as I said, Frank Wolf, who is here, and I'm not sure his former, is Don Nichols here? Yes. Okay. And then, of course, Joe Lieberman, who is also a great hero and a true statesman. Thank you for standing up for religious freedom and creating the tools to hold violators accountable for their actions. I strive to continue this work as co-chair of the International Religious Freedom Caucus in the House and a member of the Executive Committee for the Tom Lantos Human Rights Commission. What a giant he was. Incredible. I served with him as well. Fighting, again, for a range of persecuted religious minorities such as the Falun Gong, the Uyghurs, the Tibetans in China, the Copts, the Yazidis, and other Christians in the Middle East and Africa, and the Muslim minorities around the world, such as the Ahmadis in Pakistan. And yet, even as we celebrate this remarkable anniversary of the IRFA, we know that it is even more important now, given the dire situation we currently face around the world, and even here in the United States, unfortunately. Most on mind is the current war between Israel and the radical Islamist forces of Hamas and Hezbollah. At least 1,400 innocent Israelis were brutally and indiscriminately executed for simply existing by the terrorist organization Hamas. By its own admission, it will not stop until it has wiped Israel off the map and has exterminated all Jewish people. That's pure evil, folks, and I know you agree, plain and simple. I stand with Israel and the Jewish people in their right to defend themselves against the evil seeking their annihilation. The effects of this war are already having global repercussions, as you know, specifically with the shocking and violent rise of anti-Semitic rhetoric and action, which is mind-boggling to imagine given the fact that I've been talking about the rise of anti-Semitism, as have you, for years now. Back in 2018, we held an international religious freedom briefing on the global increase of anti-Semitism. Just 2 years ago, in my own community in the Tampa Bay area, there was an anti-Semitic hate crime, and I condemned it. Where the Florida Holocaust Museum is in St. Petersburg, Florida, it was desecrated with a swastika and a message that read, "Jews are guilty." Let me frankly state, hate and hate groups have no place in our society, which is why I'm so alarmed by the recent displays of anti-Semitism on U.S. campuses. We've seen student groups and organized demonstrations condoning, even celebrating the October 7th terror attack against innocent Israelis. Some have even adopted the imagery of a paraglider to advertise their rallies. Others have enthusiastically chanted the death toll from the terror attack. This is utterly disgusting, in my opinion, and should be routinely and universally condemned by everyone. I have joined my colleagues on numerous congressional efforts to push for accountability for this hate speech and pressure both Secretary of Education and institutes of higher education to follow through with their legal obligation to provide all students, including Jewish students, a school environment free from discrimination based on race, color, or national origin, including shared ancestry or ethnic characteristics. It is important that we directly and unflinchingly address this scourge, not only for the members of the international Jewish community, but also for minority communities worldwide facing discrimination and hate. History provides us with a clear reminder of what happens when people stand by while hate and intolerance grow. The hesitation of the international community to act over 100 years ago, following the end of the First World War, created the conditions for the Holocaust, where 17 million people, including 6 million Jews, were systematically killed. Why the world learned a grave lesson and swore never forget, never again. Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism are nevertheless on the rise, unfortunately, folks. We can't tolerate that. We cannot forget. It is for this reason I'm proud that the Never Again Education Act, which I co-led, was signed into law last Congress. This law expanded access to Holocaust and anti-hate education to teach children the important lessons of the Holocaust and the consequences of bigotry and hate. While the House of Representatives was also able to pass the resolution condemning anti-Semitism and bigotry, as I said last Congress, it is clear from some members' recent comments, very few, that the House must act again, though, in passing a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and in support of our ally Israel. The right to exist and the right to follow your beliefs should not be controversial, particularly in this country. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to speak and celebrate the historic achievement of the IRFA's 25th anniversary. Thank you and God bless.
Thank you, Congressman. And Congressman, we want to note and thank you for your advocacy of two religious prisoners of conscience, one in China and one in Tajikistan. So we want to thank you for your leadership in that regard as well. Thank you, and thank you for joining us. And now we will have the video for former Senator Joseph Lieberman.
Well, congratulations on the 25th anniversary of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to join the celebration today, at least in this virtual way. I apologize that I've got a bit of a cold and sore throat this morning, so I will not be singing Happy Anniversary, but I will be singing your praises. I was thinking that there's a famous expression, certainly around Congress, that sausages and laws should not be seen in the making. True enough. But the corollary or a follow-on to that is that as a legislator, former legislator, I can tell you that when you're fortunate enough to make a law, you're really not sure how it's going to be implemented or whether it will work. And as someone who was privileged to work with a lot of people inside Congress, particularly Senator Don Nichols, and people outside Congress on the International Religious Freedom Act 25 years ago this month, I really thank you for making this law work as well as you have. All of us felt that the idea of having an International Religious Freedom Commission was so fundamental to what America is about that we didn't know why it had not already happened. I mean, think about it. When the Pilgrims arrived on the Mayflower and stepped onto the Rock in Massachusetts, the spiritual leader, William Brewster, actually recited the words of Psalm 100. So really from the beginning, this was a faith-based country. And of course, it's right there in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence, particularly the catalytic sentence about the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that are the endowment of our Creator. And apropos of the Religious Freedom Commission, that declaration of the faith-based human rights is universal. It's obviously, God didn't give those rights just to Americans, but to the whole world, every person on earth. And it's why it's so critically important that human rights generally, but also religious freedom specifically, be at the center of our relations with the rest of the world. And that's exactly why we adopted the Religious Freedom Act 25 years ago this month. Truthfully, we were, well, I'll read you some words that I spoke on the floor of the Senate in October of 1998. A quote from me: "This effort began with some Pied Pipers outside Congress who educated us to the fact that the religious freedoms that we hold so dear in the United States are not real for millions of people around the world. They were particularly not real for Christians who were then subjected to discrimination and in many cases persecution." And I would add that is still true in many places in the world today. I do want to say that in my case, one of the Pied Pipers, but really a better word is gadfly or advocate, was Michael Horowitz, who made really compelling appeals to me that we needed this kind of commission. And the basic idea has just worked so well because of the work that Chairman Cooper and members of the commission now and all your predecessors have done, which is to do this annual report of the state of religious freedom in every country of the world, reported to the State Department, the President, and thereby put the quest for religious freedom and our responsibility to support it around the world at closer to the center of our American foreign policy. And it's really worked and had a big effect in protecting the religious rights of a lot of people around the world who would not otherwise have been protected. The reality is that the work that you've done in the first 25 years, I think, will be even more important in the next 25. Religion is like so much else in human history and our lives. It can either be used for good or bad. And most of the time, my understanding of history tells me that the power of religion to motivate people to behave well has been an extremely constructive force, certainly in American life. But it can also be extremely divisive and lead groups either who are not religious to find religion in their countries as a threat to them, or others who are religious to punish people who are not of their religion. And at this time, which is so divided in the world, in which so many people are anxious and angry, unfortunately, the threats to religious freedom may intensify. So the work that you do and have done so wonderfully for the last 25 years will even be more important in the years ahead. So what can I say but thank you. God bless you in your work. You have held America true to what America is all about and helped us fulfill our responsibility to take the blessings of liberty that we enjoy here at home and try to spread them to people around the world. Thank you very, very much for making this law work. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you today. All the best.
Many thanks again to Senator Lieberman. And now to a man who personifies and exemplifies what we do here today. Commissioner Wolf, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for being here. I want to begin by saying I completely agree in the condemnation of the activity of Hamas and what's taking place to Jewish students on American college campuses, and we all should be speaking out against that publicly over and over. I was asked to make some comments on what the environment was at the time, and both in the House and the Senate, and also to talk a little bit about what and I'm speaking for myself, not for USCIRF, what I believe you might want to do and we should do to make a difference. Pew survey says that 80% of the world's population lives in a religiously repressive nation. An environment, we see it taking place in China, the Catholic Church, the Protestant Church, genocide, cultural genocide against the Tibetan Buddhists. I've been in Tibet. Seen what every monastery has a public security police there. Can you imagine in your own church or your own synagogue to have the secret police there when you're going in to worship? Actual genocide against the Uyghur Muslims. The Falun Gong, we've seen 60,000 a year harvesting of their organs, and it's just so brutal. We see what's taking place. So it's going on all over the world. When the legislation was introduced, there was a lot of opposition to it. You would have thought that it would have been welcome. People would have said, this is a great idea. There was a lot of opposition. There was opposition by the Clinton administration. I'm going to read you something that Secretary Madeleine Albright, a speech that she gave at Catholic University. Let the record show, I love Madeleine Albright. Madeleine Albright lived in my congressional district. She had a farm up in Loudoun County. So this is not meant as a criticism of Madeleine Albright. But the administration at that time was opposed in the State Department. And she said at a speech, which interesting, was October 23rd, today, 1997. And here's what Secretary Albright said at a speech at Catholic University. She said, it would establish a new and unneeded bureaucracy and deprive U.S. officials of the flexibility required to protect the overall foreign policy interests of the United States. They were opposed to it. The State Department was opposed to it. I am very grateful, and I will say it publicly, I'm grateful that President Clinton signed it in spite of the opposition by some in the administration. Secondly, the business community opposed it. I mean, the Chamber of Commerce and some of the high-tech companies, They opposed this thing. They didn't want to say publicly too much. They worked this hill over and over and through good offices. Let me just say, this has always been, particularly in the House, but also in the Senate, a bipartisan issue whereby Republicans and Democrats came together to kind of do something about it. The circumstances, I think, that kind of led to this was one, I believe President Reagan said that the words in the Constitution and the words in the Declaration of Independence were a covenant, not a contract, but a covenant with the people, not only of Philadelphia in 1776 and 1787, but with the entire world. President Reagan and Pope John Paul and Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher kind of set the stage, if you will, when we saw the fall of the Soviet Union. Sudan was a big issue in the early 90s. And again, bipartisan, Republican and Democrats. Many times I would go to Sudan. There was almost always a Democratic member there. There was a Democratic and Republican head of the Sudan caucus. It was, so Sudan, remember, 1 million Christians mainly, some Muslims were killed by Bashir. You remember Bashir invited Osama bin Laden to live. Osama bin Laden lived in Sudan. And so that kind of led the effort. And there were a lot of people. And God bless your colleague, Senator John Danforth. When President Bush appointed Danforth to be the special envoy for Sudan, it made a tremendous difference. But Sudan got everybody interested following the fall of the Berlin Wall. Next, China. When you would go to China, I remember Chris Smith and I would go and talk to the underground Catholic bishops, and they would tell us a story, and we watched what took place in Tiananmen, and we talked at Tiananmen Square, people, family members, and everything. So China just kind of woke up the world to say what was taking place in China. Thirdly, and I think this is very important, I don't see it today. I don't mean that as criticism, but I don't see it today. The faith community was really involved. I wrote down the names last night. Chuck Colson. Chuck was just, God bless him, he was on this thing. Michael Horowitz, and I thank Senator Lieberman for him. Michael Horowitz really worked this issue. He was with the Heritage Foundation, or then Hudson Foundation during the time. Nina Shea, many of you know Nina. Nina wrote about this, was pushed by this. It was Cardinal Worrell. I remember I had a meeting in my office about a religious freedom issue, and I invited some people. Cardinal Worrell walked into my office. He was so interested in this issue. Then there were many, many others. Congressman Chris Smith, God bless. I think Chris Smith should be nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Chris Smith has done more and been more and said more on this issue, but Chris was so dogged with regard to staying with this. And Harry Wu and the church community. There was a little group down in Texas called the Midland Ministerial Group, and in a little town in Texas, Midland. They would come into town and they would work. So the faith community, and lastly, I want to give credit to the Jewish community. I was educated by many in my congressional district who were Jewish, who would come and tell me, and I really modeled them, and just listen to Natan Sharansky, and Chris Smith and I went into Perm Camp 35. The Jewish community really led the effort on this. If you recall, there was a large rally on the mall. Ronald Reagan spoke. There were thousands there. I wish we could get that kind of a rally. So the Jewish community really did an outstanding. And I was also a bunch of men. I don't know if he's here. Rabbi Saperstein. Rabbi Saperstein, who I believe was the first or second president head of USCIRF, was a dogged and really involved and helped educate me on this history. It was stalled. We passed it in the House. Now, this gentleman over here was the key. There were four key God bless him, Senator Arlen Specter. Arlen put the bill in. He was really good. He was from my home state of Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised, and Arlen Specter, very, very, very important. Senator Lieberman, very, very important. Senator Nichols, very, very important. In fact, there's the two people that literally saved the bill. They saved the bill. Not many people realize, but it was the last day. The people that saved the bill, Don Nichols, and the guy who I was in a small fellowship with him, and you know him well, Dan Coates. God bless Dan Coates. Dan couldn't be here, but if you know Dan Coates, tell him that Wolfstead Coates is the best. Coates called about 6 o'clock at night. The House had still in session. Members told to go home, no more roll calls, just pro forma business. And Coach said, Nichols, I got this. We can get this over there. It's a little weakened now. It's watered down. Do you want it? Yes. He sent it over because of Don Nichols and Dan Coates. There was a law passed that set up this commission that's done all this. And if they had not done it, it would have never passed the next session because the opposition from the business community was rolling. So I said to Don Nichols, God bless Don Nichols, who lived in my congressional district when he must have read my mail sometimes, my newsletter, and Dan Coates. And I would ask you, when you see Dan, would you tell him, if it hadn't been for the two of you, it would have never passed. Where do we go from here? These are my own views. One, I think you have to keep it bipartisan. I think the giants of Henry Hyde and Tom Lantos, you got to keep it bipartisan. What made the success for Sudan was bipartisan. There were Republican and Democrat. You got to keep this thing bipartisan. Secondly, the faith community has to get back involved. Members of Congress, I have always said that everything that takes place in government and politics is downstream from culture. But everything that takes place in culture is downstream from the church, from the synagogue, from the mosque, from the community. We need the religious community to engage again and get back in this issue the way that they were before. It would not have passed with regard to the leaders of Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim. All the groups came together then. They have to come together then. Nextly, we need to motivate the young people. When I see the young people on college campuses, this has to be an issue that they really deeply care. They're good on that campus. If we could educate them, I think the young people have to be involved. Next, the next is going to be very, very controversial. It's my position, nobody else's. I think we have to ban lobbying for China. I don't believe we can have people lobbying, law firms in town lobbying for China when they're committing genocide against Uyghur Muslims and taking organs out from the Falun Gong and taking down crosses from Catholic churches and arresting Protestant house church leaders and doing that. So I think one recommendation that Congress should take is ban lobbying for China and then ban lobbying for any country that is a CPC designated country for 4 years straight. The reason is that would be the lobbyists would then help you because they could then go to the country and say, listen, you're going to be on a CPC. They're going to be banned. And so I think, but we have to ban lobby for China because of what they're doing. And also China is aiding Russia against Ukraine. And I support Americans helping Ukraine, and yet China is aiding. And lastly, China is aiding Iran, which is behind, I believe, what's taking place today in Israel. Lastly, I think Congress has to give USCIRF the necessary funding. USCIRF's funding has been cut. It's now at $3.5 million, when if you looked at the rate of inflation, it would be very, very high. So Congress needs to give USCIRF at least $4.5 to $5 million funding. And lastly, you have to give a permanent authorization or a 3 to 5 year authorization to USCIRF so they don't have to desperately wonder, will they have a job or not have a job? But there needs to be a permanent or long-term funding with that necessary authorization. And with that, I just think that this is such an important issue that, again, I end where I began. Make it bipartisan. And one way to do that is ask a Republican and a Democratic member to come together and travel to a country where this is taking place, whereby they become friends and experience together so they can come back and work on this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman Wolf. And before we hear from Senator Nichols, we're going to hear from a couple of representatives who are here. First, from New York, Representative Mike Lawler.
Well, if I became a senator, Chuck Schumer might have a problem with that. So,
And since he appointed me, I don't want to get in any trouble with him.
well, it's great to be here with all of you, and I want to thank Commissioner Wolf for his work, to really bring this together 25 years ago, and the work that USCIRF has done during that time has been monumental and important work. And we see today with the terrorist attack in Israel, we still have a lot of work to do. And I think at the core of our society, at the core of our country, is our faith. The United States and our Constitution is based on Judeo-Christian values, and the Abrahamic religions have played a pivotal role in society and in the world. And I think when we look today at some of the challenges that we're facing, I agree, part of the problem that we're dealing with, frankly, is a lack of faith in the public sphere, a lack of faith in our discourse. And we see society in some respects crumbling before us. The vitriol, the hatred, the bigotry, the anger, the fact that in our public debate, there's a lack of respect for diversity of opinion. We immediately ascribe adjectives to those we disagree with politically or on a policy. And it's destructive. And I think we have to get back to the core of what unites us, what brings humanity together, and it is religion. And I represent the 17th District of New York. This district is home to one of the largest Jewish communities in the country. Now, I'm Irish, Italian, Catholic, but I have a very diverse district. 19% of my district is Latino, most of them obviously Catholic. But a large Orthodox Jewish community. I have a large Indian community. And you see the different religions and the different cultures and the different communities. This is a district that in different iterations was represented by Ben Gilman and Elliot Engel, two chairs of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House. I'm proud to serve on the Foreign Affairs Committee and to get to deal with a lot of these issues. And earlier this year, I traveled with Speaker McCarthy to Israel for the 75th anniversary. And we got to go see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the Western Wall and get a tour of the city of David under excavation. And to see really what unites countries and societies throughout the world. And I think when I see what is happening right now in the Middle East, when we see what is happening in Ukraine, these are real challenges that, frankly, make what's happening across the street pale in comparison. We have a lot of work to do. And I know Tracy and I want to get back to work and focused on dealing with these issues and really diving into the substance of it. But I can tell you in closing what I would say, we have seen a rapid rise in anti-Semitism here in the United States. Not just around the world, not just in the Middle East, but here in the United States. A lot of it starting on our college campuses. And that needs to be rooted out. And it needs to stop. The anti-Zionist movement is rooted in anti-Semitism. The BDS movement is anti-Semitism. We need to be able to define it. We need to be able to call it out, and we need to address it. And we need to take on the bad actors around the world, whether it's China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, in this unholy alliance that they have teamed up in, and hold them accountable for the human rights violations, the war crimes, and the religious bigotry that they have been engaged in. So USCIRF plays a critical role, and I look forward to continuing to partner with and work with to address these issues. So thank you so much for being here and allowing me to speak to you.
So thank you, Congressman, and we will now hear from Congressman Tracy Mann.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon. As was mentioned, I'm Congressman Tracy Mann. I represent the big 1st District of Kansas. Which, you think about Kansas, my district is the western 2/3 of the state, except for the Wichita area. We're the largest agriculture producing district in the country, so if you ate today, there's a good chance that some of those products came from our district. We're also the geographic center of the country, and my district would not look anything like Mike Lawler's district, though I would say that I agreed with every word that he said wholeheartedly, and it's an honor to serve with him. It's good to be here near the upper chamber. Mike and I serve in the lower chamber. We are running a very well-oiled, efficient machine over there right now, as you all are well aware, but it's good to be over here for just a little bit. Fantastic to see Congressman Wolf. Big fan of yours. From afar, I'm the Republican chair of the Hunger Caucus as well. I know for years you and Tony Hall did a lot of work in that space, and good to see you, Senator Nichols. My wife, I'm a big fan of yours as well. My wife is an Okie from Owasso, and my father-in-law played football for the Oklahoma Sooners. So we are all in Oklahoma as well. And lastly, I heard you mentioned Arlen Specter. So yesterday, my wife and I and our 4 kids, we were coming back from my twin sister's wedding. Long story, but we drove through Russell, Kansas, which is in my district. Russell's population 4,000 in the western plains of Kansas, home of Bob Dole, also the boyhood home of Arlen Specter, which a lot of people don't realize that Arlen Specter lived in Russell, Kansas, same town as Bob Dole before he later was a member of Congress from Pennsylvania. And Kansas, of course, is also a proud home of Sam Brownback as well, who's been very active in this space, has been a friend and mentor of mine over the years. So it's an honor to be with you all today and celebrate the 25th anniversary of the International Religious Freedom Act. It was fun to hear about how that act actually came together and got passed. Millions of people around the world today are suffering from religious persecution, which we know takes many forms. America does stand and should stand against religious persecution in all of its forms because religious freedom is a foundational value of this country. It inspired our founding fathers to step out in faith and launch the American experiment 247 years ago. And it inspires us today in Congress as we govern to consider this law. I think we should also acknowledge an attack on religious freedom for one person anywhere is an attack on religious freedom for all peoples everywhere. 25 years ago, the International Religious Freedom Act codified religious freedom into American foreign policy. The legislation stated in no uncertain terms that the United States of America will not sit idly by while people are persecuted, tortured, or killed for their religious beliefs. If a foreign government or entity is persecuting people for their religious beliefs, the International Religious Freedom Act empowers America to step up and respond forcefully. We will fight back on behalf of oppressed people. We will suspend aid, impose sanctions, and take steps to bring an end to all forms of religious persecution. Our country operates this way because we acknowledge God. We acknowledge that human rights themselves don't come from a king or from government. They come from God because he created us. In 1814, Francis Scott Key wrote a poem called The Star-Spangled Banner. We sing the first stanza, of course, of that poem as our national anthem. But here's the last stanza. Oh, thus be it ever when free men shall stand between their beloved homes and the war's desolation. Blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven-rescued land praise the power that hath made and preserved us as a nation. Then conquer we must, for our cause it is just, and this be our motto, in God is our trust. And the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave over the land of the free and the home of the brave. On the world stage, America is synonymous with religious freedom, and for 25 years, the International Religious Freedom Act has strengthened our ability to stand up for what's right, condemn evil, stop religious persecution, and protect innocent lives. Thank you, Senators Nichols and Lieberman, who originally authored this in the Senate, and to Congressman Wolf for all your work for getting this passed 25 years ago. This is a perfect example of the kind of good work that we can do when we come together across the aisle and stand up for something that we all know is right. So thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Congressman. Thank you again. We'll now hear from Representative McCormick. Representative Rich McCormick from Georgia.
Good afternoon. Thank you. It's good to be here with you today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a Marine Corps pilot and a ER doc from the Navy. Been to over 40 countries. I have one of the most diverse districts in America. We probably have every religion, every race that's common to America. In my travels, I've recently been to Ukraine. I've been to Israel, been all over the Far East, been to South America, been all over Africa. And one thing's common. No matter what kind of religion your background is from, no matter what your race is, no matter what your gender is, most people are just trying to make it to the next generation. When people are critical of the Afghanis, and when I was in Afghanistan, I'll tell you, people thought, well, why aren't they loyal to me? It's because they're literally just trying to pick a side that they can survive until the next generation. It's a survival game for most people. Here in America, we think we have it hard. We think we have racism and all kinds of discrimination. Try spending a year in another country. One of the things that makes us strong, one of the things that makes us truly united when we think we aren't, is the fact that we have tolerance, that we have acceptance of many races, of many religions, of many backgrounds. There aren't too many countries where you could go and you can actually decide who you want to protest against, and it's okay, regardless of who you're protesting against. That's what makes America strong. As a matter of fact, it's when you have freedom of religion, when you have tolerance, that you actually have peace. When you have a homogenous society of one religion, usually it becomes very protectionist. And as soon as somebody steps outside of that, there's true violence, true persecution, and true disunity. One of the things I appreciate about the United States that you can only appreciate once you spend time in foreign countries is the fact that we have some choices to make. And yes, there's going to be some violence. Yes, there's going to be some discord. Yes, there's going to be some unconventional thoughts and some things we disagree with wholeheartedly. But we live in relative peace and tranquility when compared to the rest of the world. And it's because we accept our differences and not because we focus on the things that only one group of people think. So I encourage you to take a step back from all the things that distract us, all the things that divide us, all the things that we think are so important here in the United States, and realize that it's truly a first world problem. You can go out here in the streets and be in the ultra minority and yell at a congressman right here on the streets, and it's okay. Nobody's going to stop you. Nobody's going to kill you. Nobody's going to put you in jail, at least not for a long period of time, when you disagree with me, because this is America and that is our strength, and we should count our blessings. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. And now we will have Representative Plaskett, who is here to speak as well.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Thank you so much for this invitation. I want to thank the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom for the ability to come and speak with you all this afternoon. I recognize my fellow members of Congress that have been here before and some that are coming after me to speak on our country's founding fundamental rights, our religious freedom. That government shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion nor prohibit its free exercise is a uniquely American protection at the founding of our nation. It is a core principle that allows us to be a beacon of light to the world, even its most trying times. Though we may champion this freedom on paper, the real work, we all know, is executing it in the lives of everyone. You all who are here this afternoon know this better than so many of us. The commemoration of the 25th anniversary of the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998 comes at a time where we are witnessing a resurgence of domestic anti-Semitism, Islamophobia. The FBI is receiving reports of threats to churches, mosques, temples, synagogues at striking levels. Just outside Chicago, we have witnessed the brutal killing of a child, the death of individuals in worship, in their homes, that a child would be lost because of that person or that parent's, right, religious belief, that his light is gone. Wadea's light is gone. The light of another American dream has been snuffed out. Hatred does not belong in America or anywhere in the world. Not this hatred or any hatred. It's our duty as members of Congress, our duty as Americans to work to stop this, to uphold the torch of freedom, to say to our people and to the world, this light will protect you. So I live in a very unique place in the Virgin Islands, in the Caribbean, which has its own unique religious tolerance there. The Danes, this was their one stronghold in the Caribbean for many years, the Kingdom of Denmark, where the official religion was Lutheranism. And there's a large number of Lutherans that are there on the island in which I live. But because they were interested in commerce and in growth, they were very smart to understand that we've got to have religious tolerance. We've got to make a place where all religions can come and people can feel safe to worship, to work, to grow our economy as well. And so they were very clear that the town square would have no church. Unlike many places where you see a church in the town square, there is no church in our town squares because they didn't want prominence to any one given religion. We also have, because of that, a unique position in the United States of having the second oldest continually running synagogue in the Western Hemisphere, which comes from Sephardic Jews who, leaving the Spanish Inquisition, came to the island of St. Thomas because there was religious tolerance and there was plenty of work. The Danes recognized that these group of people would be able to fortify their economy and become a really strong merchant class. Hence, Camille Pissarro, one of the greatest founders of Impressionism, was born on the island of St. Thomas to a Sephardic Jewish family. Again, in the 1940s, after the creation of Israel, we had the burgeoning of a Palestinian community on the island of St. Croix, who were also part of our merchant class there. And we have all learned to live, to coexist with one another, to respect each other's religions, and to work so that our children can live in harmony. Listen, you can't be on a small island and have too much beef with one person or another. It's going to spill out, if not in your homes, on the beach, in the grocery store, where everybody knows your name. And if you're like myself and your family have lived there for many generations, you're probably related to the person as well. But it works. It works. So much so that at the beginnings understanding in World War II of the Holocaust, what was happening, The Jewish community on St. Thomas wrote a letter to then President Roosevelt and said that we have talked with our local government and we can take thousands into our islands if you would accept them and allow them to come to us. We have a place here, a haven for them to be able to live. Unfortunately, the president did not take us up on that, and we lost many people because of that, because of lack of religious tolerance and understanding that all of us getting along together helps us all to grow. So much so that my youngest daughter, I have 5 children, my youngest is a girl, just started high school, and her high school teacher was just fascinated at the fact that this African-American girl was taking Arabic as her language. And the professor asked me, well, why would she be taking Arabic? I said, well, the next door neighbor speaks Arabic, and I guess, I need somebody, I'm a politician, I need to know what they're thinking about me. And so I need a mole around the neighborhood. So, and hence my daughter is taking Arabic. We have got to recognize the humanity in each one of us. The humanity, and not just the humanity, but the potential. And I think so much sometimes that the Founding Fathers were not thinking of religious tolerance as a means of being right, but as a means of growing the United States, of a means of recognizing that our strength is our diversity. American ingenuity can only come about if we continually bring new ideas, new creeds, new religions. And so knowing that 20% of the victims of registered hate crimes in the United States last year was targeted because of their religion or their perpetrator's perception of their practice is something that cannot continue in our country. We must keep the practice of keeping our own house in order if we as Americans expect other nations to live up to the standards set by the International Religious Freedom Act. Because of that law and the work of so many following up on its edict, we have seen violators sanctioned for their oppression of religious minorities, and some repressive governments change some laws, but there is still much work to do. It's our duty to continue to protect religious freedoms here in the United States and throughout the world. Last year, we stood up and said no to the horrors of CCP's regime in Xinjiang, working through the Ways and Means Committee to pass the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act and other legislation to try to stop the greatest ongoing abuse of religious rights at a scale anywhere in the world. So whether it's in southern Levant, in Africa, or even in partner nations like India and Turkey, we know we must do more to create space and protections for the free association and practice of religion. You can know that you have my commitment to that. And I believe that you have so many Americans' commitment to make that happen. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with you all, and can't wait for the continued work to keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. We appreciate your being with us. We'll now return to our panel and Senator Nichols. Senator Nichols.
I'll try this one. That works a little better. Frank Wolf is a champion on behalf of religious freedom around the world, and one of the reasons why we passed in the Senate was to get him off our back, because he is persistent. And I just want to say that I'm very pleased that I was author of it. I mentioned, or I'll say Joe Lieberman was a great co-chairman or co-sponsor of the legislation. I'm sorry he couldn't be here personally, but it was a pleasure to work with him. I had the pleasure of traveling with him in various places around the country. And one of the things that we always did, and Frank, and I could tell that you did it too when you traveled, we would meet leaders of countries and then we would talk about things of interest, but we'd always bring up religious freedom, particularly if they didn't have it or if it's being abused. And we would do this, and it seemed like it was almost a sporadic effort. This congressman would be, you know, you were in Sudan, and I remember Nepal, I remember Somalia, I remember Egypt, I remember China, I remember Russia. And all of us, in various ways, would bring up, wait a minute, why in China are people relegated to home churches? And what's the government doing with picking religious leaders in the Catholic Church or in other churches? Or why are the Uyghurs being persecuted like they are? And in Russia, why are the Jewish people being really discriminated against? And we did it as a little haphazard. Jim Inhofe would go into Africa and he would meet with all these different African leaders and he would bring up some of these issues. But it's a little haphazard. And so what could we do that would be better? And Frank Wolf was one of the champions, say, let's have a commission that stays on top of us, not just individual members. I mentioned Nepal. I remember I was a new member in the Senate, and one of my constituents was arrested because he was sharing gospels in Nepal. And I thought, this is outlandish. And I remember talking to Dick Lugar, as chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee in the Senate. What can I do? He said, well, call up the ambassador. I had the ambassador in my office. A couple of weeks later, this individual was out of prison. He was in prison because he was sharing it. And I remember in Somalia, we had an Oklahoma church group that wanted, and they had water shortages. It still is a big, big challenge in many countries in Africa. So they donated, we have a lot of drilling expertise in Oklahoma, so they donated rigs to drill water wells, except for the Somalian government was going to tax them at an exorbitant rate, so it'd be impossible to send it in. And again, we talked to the ambassador. Eventually, we've got that taken care of. But again, these are kind of incremental, individual. And why was that? Well, it was coming from a Christian group. It didn't make sense. And so the idea of having a commission that would expose religious intolerance, religious discrimination, religious punishment, religious death. I remember in Pakistan, and I'd just been in Pakistan, and there was a church bombing that killed over 100 people, and they were worshiping. Wow. That's hard for us to even imagine in the United States, because you can drive by in any town, and there's unlimited number of churches and synagogues and mosques, and no one cares. It's taken for granted in the United States, but it's not that way in frankly, the majority of the world. The majority of the population of the world does not have religious freedom. And so what can we do about it in a constructive manner? And so that was the genesis of this legislation. And I'm really proud of those people who have implemented it and worked on it. I want to mention John Hanford, who is also an ambassador, but he was a staff member for Dick Lugar, and he helped us in the legislation. Eric Euland helped us in the legislation. Doug Badger